we have this subject of God's psychology, and I was thinking about it quite a lot because, you see, the thing is, God is not a human. And there is something called anthropomorphization of God, which is to kind of reduce God to a human and assume that however a human operates, that's how God operates. But it's actually different. And he speaks to the whole world on all the different levels of intelligence, culture, background, political color, all the different things, all at the same time. I don't think a human being can do that.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
And so that means that each of us can try to find our level and receive what he's teaching us in that way. And we change levels from time to time. We start off, all of us, not knowing that much, and we gradually move along, and then we find ourselves moving at different rates, and some come to more and more higher levels, some stay on the same level, some are more religious, some are more philosophical. So it's a wide spectrum which is all the time changing. And he is communicating with us over years and years and years, decades. Incredible, isn't it?
Incredible.
So this very intriguing topic, the psychology of God. So I thought, well, let's see how the word psychology is used and interpreted, and can it apply to God? Does he have psychology? How do we use the word psychology? Why do we talk about God's psychology? And then the matter of understanding it. So I have been considering this, and well, if you look at psychology in Google, you will find it's all about behavior modification, and it's dealing with people who have mental problems and behavioral problems. And of course, all the people who are in front of God, all the souls of the earth, one could be forgiven for thinking that everybody has mental and behavioral problems. So in that sense, it'd be quite good if God is a psychologist trying to deal with all these wonderful human beings who are, in many cases, in very antagonistic relationship with each other. And when he comes to us as our teacher, he explains that all of this is because of karmic accounts. So I don't know whether I think of him as a psychologist. I think basically I don't. But I think there are a lot of people who do. Sometimes people use the word psychology to refer to manipulation. Because there are many in this world who like to use euphemisms, and you can use the word psychology for manipulation because it sounds a lot better. But then you start changing the meaning of words, and then people use the word according to what it doesn't mean, and then you forget what it does mean. So there is that issue, I think, with a lot of words. But what is his relationship with us? And should we call God a him? Because, of course, he is also she. But for all of us Brahmins, we are very aware that God comes through the body of Brahma Baba, which is a male body, and then for 40 years Bap Dada was coming through the body of Dadi Gulzar, but we still somehow kept on calling him he. So I don't know if there's something wrong with our psychology, or are we very used to the religious patriarchal angle on God, which is that God must be a he because he's the father. But then he says, well, I'm the father and the mother. But then sometimes he says, well, I'm the father and Brahma Baba's the mother, so he's my wife. And I give birth to you through his mouth. But, you know, behind all of that, he's the teacher. And in the English language, the word he is traditionally applicable to a he or a she. We talk about mankind, and it can't be only men. If there were only men and no women, then there wouldn't be any mankind, because everybody would die, and that would be that. So then now people start calling it humankind. But you know, we all are in a social, political, religious environment which is essentially patriarchal. And so I think the whole world is used to God being an authority figure. All the powers that are normally invested in the patriarchal males are applied to God. So we can think of God in that way. And the feminine aspect of God is known well by probably a lot less people. So I think the psychology of God is an interface with the psychology of people. And God is talking to humanity in general, and he's talking to BKs, which means Brahma Kumars and Kumaris. And then he said that the world is in a state of imbalance, and the primary imbalance is the imbalance between males and females in the social, political, educational world. And so he decided to put women in front. So that is, in a way, an interesting psychological act, because he sets up a community in the context of a very strongly patriarchal culture, which was sinned in, at that time, India. Later it became part of Pakistan. And but the world of India, Pakistan, and it's a very, very patriarchal world where the women are not emancipated and are definitely second-class citizens. So he wanted to reestablish this balance by putting the women in front and giving women positions of responsibility, giving them the power and the duty to handle the finances of the organization. The women were the teachers, they were on stage, and all of this created a social environment which was very different from what we call the Lokik, the worldly social environment. And so it was very shocking for the society at that time. And all that was in the 1930s. So that was 80 years ago or more, nearly 90 years ago. So it was essentially is a different century. And the world has changed a great deal since that time. But overall, it is still biased against women, children, people of color, people who are of different orientations from the majority. There are many biases against. And so Shiv Baba wants us to become free from these biases. And I think the various ways in which he does that is also psychological, because it affects people's psyche. And the psyche is, of course, the soul. And traditional psychology is a branch of medicine, and it's all to do with the brain. And from God's point of view, the brain is a piece of hardware, but the actual person is a soul. And the brain that you get is a function of your karma of previous incarnations. So you are affected physiologically by your karma of past births. And you're also very much affected by the body that you end up in this birth. And so one of the things he says is that you have to think of yourself as a soul and not a body. And so everybody says, yes, 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 I'm a female soul. No. You're a soul. Souls don't have genders. Or I hear sometimes in the BK world, oh, the Chinese souls are coming and the German souls are here and the French souls are over there. No, souls don't have nationalities, bodies. And so there's a tendency to use the word soul to mean body. And that's what I mean about we take a word, we change its meaning, and we carry on as usual. With a slight change of vocabulary, but without any change in what we mean. Even though we use the right words, we apply them as if they have a different meaning. And so God has to counteract that in many ways. And then there is, along with God, there is also Maya. And sometimes people think Maya is some sort of a she, because there's another character called Ravan who's definitely a he. And if you look at the Hindu iconography, there are pictures of Ravan, but there is no picture of Maya. Because Maya is not a woman. But most people act and speak and presume that Maya is the female counterpart of Ravan, but it's not. Again, it is the mentality of body consciousness that takes over, and in spite of everything that God explains, people have a tendency to just change it so that it fits with their pre-existing worldview. So this is one of the problems that God has to deal with. And I brought in the idea of Maya because Maya refers to materialism. And the consciousness of the body is another word for materialism. And the matter is the body. And so when you look at yourself in the mirror, you do not see yourself genderless. You see yourself according to the all the different characteristics that are imposed upon you by a society that looks at you according to your gender, your culture, your religion, your caste, your education level, your financial attributes. All of these things are constantly reflected back to you 24 hours a day. And so God says, okay, give me 1 hour a day and I will be able to counteract that. And so they can have their 23 hours with you, but I will take 1 hour with you. And if you pay attention to me and you do what I say, you will yourself be able to counteract the effect of that reflected attitude that is imposed upon you. There is an expression that he tells us which is very well known in India and not necessarily understood. But there is an expression, jaise drishti vaise srishti. So, as is the eye, the way you look, so is the world. In English, we have an expression, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which is similar because it depends on you whether something's beautiful or not it. And in the same way, when you have a very strongly patriarchal society, it divides everyone up into males and females, and there are no ifs, ands, or buts. And so Shiv Baba has to, every day, counteract that with the energy of his drishti, with the words that he says. But you're in a social context. So, for example, you go into any class, a BK class, and you find on one side is the brothers and on the other side is the sisters. And then you have people who say, okay, where do the gay people sit? So I used to say, okay, you sit in the middle, don't worry about it. But actually, this division is in order to appease the society, the patriarchal society, because if you go too far, according to them, they just will not listen to what you have to say. And part of Baba's work is to get us sufficiently conscious and sufficiently educated that we can communicate to other people what he is teaching to us. And so there has to be many forms of compromise to make that possible. And the other thing is that it takes a very, very, very long time to get a person who is body conscious to become soul conscious. It's not just something you can do in half an hour's meditation. But it really takes a whole lifetime for you to be so clear and so much in your power that you do not respond in any way to ways in which the society around you looks at you according to your gender, your color, etc., etc. Because you have been doing that for many, many births. So this is a very deeply rooted sanskara. And it's very difficult to put your finger on because everyone is in a culture, with the exception of very, very few people who are in matriarchal cultures, but everyone is in a culture where they're very conscious of the body. And according to the religions, this consciousness of what gender you are and so on came with the beginning of the Copper Age. In Christianity, they talk of the fall from heaven and a new land on earth. And so this, according to Baba, is when the soul used up half of its power. And then the consciousness couldn't naturally have soul consciousness. In the first half of the cycle, there's a natural soul consciousness, and everyone is blind to these differentiations based on physical characteristics, and all they see is the soul. Whereas in this day and age, all everybody sees is the body and the behavior and the rank and so many things. So this is really what he is dealing with. And so he created a family. And it started off quite small, and now it's very, very large. And I don't know how many there are in the family, but give or take roughly 1 million people. And they are from all races and cultures and religions and political affiliations and so on. But of course, the vast majority are from India. And then within India, there are huge differences between the north and the south, especially because very big difference in history. So he has a lot of work to do as a parent, as a teacher, and he also calls himself the Supreme Satguru. So as a psychologist, since we have all relationships with God, God is our psychologist individually, and then collectively he is functioning as a psychologist dealing with a lot of people who are very distorted, and distorted in the sense that they've been affected, the soul has been affected by the experiences in many lives, many traumas, a lot of difficulties, severe karmic accounts, so many things that are invisible, because once you leave your body, you forget everything that happened in that life and you get on with another life. So all we know is our history in this life. And the more we study the knowledge, the more we are able to see ourselves in the context of the entire cycle. So, for example, it's very useful, I think, to think that, okay, here am I'm 50% male and 50% female, insofar as if I have had 84 births, then 42 of them male and 42 of them female, so I am an androgynous being. And so then you have to think, okay, how does an androgynous being feel and function, especially in the context of a world which is not androgynous and which looks at you according to a lot of preconceptions. Preconceptions about your gender, your race, your everything. And most people don't really stop to ask somebody who they are. They will project on a person, especially if they are looking at you as part of a group which is different from the group that they belong to. And so God says, you don't have any groups because you're all souls, and all souls are points of light. So even your consciousness of belonging to one group or another is artificial, and you cannot justify thinking of yourself as belonging to one group and thinking of other people as belonging to a different group, which means that there cannot be any racism. So the racial bias, which is very, very strong throughout the world, is all artificial. And so God has to make everybody able to perceive each other independently of race, independently of gender, independently of religion. And so all these considerations he wants everyone to forget, but that's not so easy, because constantly it is being reflected back to you. And I think each and every person who studies Raj Yoga needs to sit with themselves and identify what prejudices they still have. And how do you know if you're racist or not? A lot of people say, oh, I'm not racist, but they are. Or they say, well, I'm not gender biased, but they are. And so there's a very big difference between theoretically taking a position and the reality of how you function, how you respond. And so Baba, as he teaches us, has to make us aware of the extent to which there is dishonesty with the self. So one of the issues in psychology is denial. So a person will deny that they have this or that vice, or they will deny that they have this or that prejudice, or they will justify it through this, that, and the other reason, and say that, yeah, they know, but, and there are all these justifications that get used, and then that enables the person to feel all right about being all wrong. And just that's called denial. And so God, the psychologist, has a lot of work to do to get people to face themselves, to face truth. And so the great helper in this is Maya. And how does Maya help? Most people think of Maya as some sort of bad experience or some sort of delusion or illusion, or you get overcome by something and you say, well, I would if I could, but I can't, or I was trying to, or I didn't mean to, or it's okay, it doesn't really matter, nobody saw, so it's okay, it didn't really happen because nobody saw. And so this is very much his work as a psychologist, to get us to be honest. And most people don't have the slightest willingness to become honest, because if you become honest, then you expose yourself, and then you might lose face, and that would be worse than death. So God has to get us to have this ego death, because all these problems are because of what he calls ego. And then he doesn't just call it ego, he calls it false ego. And then there's an equation or an equating of body consciousness and false ego. He says it's the same thing. And ego is such a thing that is invisible to the person who has it, but fairly visible to the people who are looking at the person who has it and who's displaying it, but it's not totally visible. And if you get a gathering of people who have a lot of ego, all of them, then they do have ego clashes, but they don't think that it's ego clashes. And so the denial comes in everywhere. And I think it's a great issue for God to say, okay, I'm going to enlist Maya to give you as much trouble as possible, so that you get basically tormented by the inability to maintain your false front, because Maya will cause it to come crashing down. So that's really very helpful in becoming free from ego. And so Baba will equate ego and body consciousness and false consciousness. It's all one and the same thing. And then he says, okay, now be soul conscious. And everybody says, yes, yes, yes. But the thing is, it's so subtle and so deep that just saying yes doesn't really do the job, because you have to sit with the idea. And I think this is, for me, the great importance of God, that God is the teacher. And so every day he speaks to the whole family. And the whole family is made up of a lot of religious people, a lot of anti-religious people, people who are from all different backgrounds and social levels, and yet he's able, this extraordinary capacity, he's able to speak to all these different levels, all these different levels of background and intelligence and comprehension, and satisfy each one, and each one will interpret and resonate with what God is saying and use it in their daily life, and they will be a student and they will move along, and each one understands it differently. Each one works with it differently, and that's because each one is different. So I think this is not something that's possible for a human being to understand, because it's outside the range of a human being to communicate with all human beings effectively. And I think that God can do that, and that's one of the things that differentiates God from a human being, who can only, there's this expression, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time, because there's always going to be someone who will just say what they're saying is untrue. But God is called truth. And I think there is something inside every human being which resonates with that which we call the ring of truth. And when you hear a truth which resonates with you, then it's undeniable. And I think that he uses this to gradually and slowly shift us. Because the shift from the fallen, degraded, Tamil Pradhan person that everyone has become by the end of the Iron Age, to this very elevated divine being called the deity at the beginning of the Golden Age, you can't make that change that quickly, because the human soul cannot survive it. It's too drastic. And so he goes very, very slowly over the course of decades and decades and decades. I mean, for me, I've been exposed to this, studying this, working with this, teaching it for 50 years. And the people who came at the beginning in the 1930s, they were studying and teaching and working with it for 80 years and 90 years practically. And so it's an extraordinary thing that it takes an entire lifetime to slowly, slowly move through all these shifts that happen. I don't think the spiritual progress happens in a smooth way at all. It's not like setting yourself on the highway, setting your cruise control and saying, okay, if I carry on at this speed, I will reach the destination. It is not like that at all. It's more of a journey up a steep mountain where you're going up and down and backwards and forwards, and different terrain, different weather, different circumstances which affect you in many different ways. Sometimes you feel you're sailing along beautifully, sometimes you'll be calmed. It's also been called crossing the ocean, and the ocean has storms, the mountain has storms as well. And I remember when I first discovered about Raj Yoga, which was before I encountered Brahma Kumaris, but one thing that I liked about it was that it was described as the most difficult thing anybody could do. And I thought, okay, that's what I must do, because if it's too easy, it's not worth doing. And so although we call it Easy Raj Yoga, and Baba sometimes says, well, it's not that easy. And in fact, it's really very difficult because you have to be in it for the long haul, and you will be encountering internal and external circumstances that you are not prepared for, and you have to deal with them. And it comes, and as you progress further, your tests get more and more difficult, more and more unexpected, and not everybody can manage this marathon all the way to the end. But another very important part, I think, of God's psychology is the encouragement. He says, I'm always with you. You are my children. I'm taking you to your destination. Just come to class, be in my remembrance, get through all the tests, and always remember I am with you, and you can experience that. The support and the support of the gathering is also very important, but of course one shouldn't be dependent on being carried along by the gathering. You have to make your own efforts, and you have to contribute to encouraging others.
There's one question. Souls experience the virtues through body. How is that Shiv Baba, the seat, have all these virtues without experiences through body? Hope you understand my question.
I do very well, yes. Well, the first thing to think about is, what is a virtue? And for most people who have been to Madhuban, you will hear about 36 virtues, and they're all written on the wall outside the history hall in Pandav Bhavan, and you can see them, and you can look at yourself and see, well, do I have this one, that one, the other one? And so you tend to be able to discern a virtue through somebody's behavior, and you experience that virtue through that person's behavior, because a virtue cannot be experienced directly. Because a virtue is not a physical thing. And so this is why we really need to think about what a virtue is. And I think one thing that's very helpful is to think about the what I call the elements of the soul. You see, we're used to science and matter, so we know that there are 5 elements of matter, which is air, earth, fire, water, and ether. And in comparison with that, the soul is made of purity, peace, power, love, bliss. And those are completely intangible, or almost completely intangible, because you can experience them directly only when you're in deep meditation, and in that way you're not experiencing them from another person. You may experience them as a meditation experience. You may experience your own purity, peace, power, love, bliss. Usually the first experience people have is that it is true that I'm a peaceful soul, because they feel it, you see. And then, is that a virtue or is it something else? And so I think I would need to call that a quality. Because when we start talking about these things, real deep spiritual stuff, we're talking about something that cannot be experienced through sense perception. And you can only operate like that when you are detached from the body and in soul consciousness. And that takes a lot of deep effort to reach in a stable way. But BKs always want to have, the experience right here, right now, right quick. They want it to stay, but it's not like that. And so we tend to, fall into the body conscious way of experiencing something through somebody's behavior. But we need to keep thinking about it and keep practicing in meditation and really look at our own selves, that your motivation for your karma is what exactly. So if you're motivated by love, your behavior will be loving, kind, charitable, gentle, etc., etc. So these are all virtues which are discernible through action. That means karma. And so if you are closed down to your essential qualities and you are reacting to something that displeases you, then your behavior will come from a different motivation of vengeance or hatred or suspicion or something like that. And then your behavior will be something that is harmful, unpleasant, unkind, etc. And then those will be called vices. So this is how it works. And you cannot acquire a virtue by just meditating on it. I really don't think that's going to help. What you need to do is think about what would be a virtuous action in this or that circumstance. And I think this is why Baba is teaching us what he calls Sahaj Raj Yoga. And Sahaj does mean easy, but mostly it means in the context of regular life. So you're in the context of your family, your people at work, your community, and you have interaction with people, and sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's unpleasant, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult. And so you are in all these situations and circumstances which trigger your weaknesses, because you have weaknesses, and if they don't trigger them, then you will deny that you have them. But once they get triggered, then you can't deny it, because it's been photographed, videotaped, and seen by somebody and talked about by somebody. So that's it. You have to face it. And so when we have passed through a circumstance, then we go back to base, sit down in meditation, and we remember, okay, this is what happened today, and you analyze it. What provoked me? What was the weakness? Did I not have enough yoga? What's going on here? Why was I provoked in this particular way? And what will I do about it? And mostly, when your level of yoga is low, then you will easily be triggered to do a weak action. And this is why Baba wants us to have a lot of yoga, because then you can keep yourself in your power and perform according to your essence, which is your spiritual strength, and then it's virtuous naturally.
And there's another one is coming. Is there a method or say a keyword which would help me to pinpoint whether I have prejudice?
First of all, you have to see what prejudice is. And prejudice is that you don't like a particular group of people because of some reason that has nothing to do with them. It means you're prejudging somebody. And so in that you have generalization. And generalization is always false by definition. And so, like, for example, some people, if they are prejudiced against the people of Islam, they will say all Muslims are terrorists. That's a generalization, which is completely untrue. There are a very small number of Islamic people who would call themselves terrorists or who would decide to do terrorist activity, but then there are terrorists in all sorts of other groups, including your group, But then you would say, you know, well, the people in my group who are doing that, they're not terrorists, they're freedom fighters. And so you change the language to favor yourself and disfavor someone else for the same thing. And then that is called a prejudice. Or you might say, okay, in our family, we don't like this or that type of person, or people of this or that class, or profession, or all of these things. And so you arrive at a judgment which has nothing to do with the individuals concerned. It's a prejudgment and a generalization. So how do you know if you still have it? Is that it will come up, so that you are in the face of a situation which will provoke your feelings and attitudes of prejudice, so that you can see it. If that doesn't happen, you won't know. And this is why in Raj Yoga there are constant circumstances which are provocative and testing, so that you can understand what it is that you're not neutral about. And if you are really free from prejudice, your relationship with people is on the basis of, you know, your experience of the soul. And you take each one individually, and you don't see they're males or females, or what color the body is, or what religion it is. You're interacting with the brother soul, and brother means whether a sister or a brother in the sense of the body, but the soul is your brother, and your relationship with your brother is love and acceptance. You know, you see the soul, and you are positive towards that soul until they give you some reason where you need to pull back a little bit, because everything there is the need to evaluate people. I mean, we have this word "don't judge," you know, which is a very unintelligent word, really, because you have to judge. But when people say "don't judge," what they mean is don't condemn, or don't criticize, or something like that. The big problem is the English language has been misused, so people don't really know what the words mean anymore. And I don't think you can do anything about that, because it's so widespread, and that causes a great deal of misunderstanding and lack of clarity. So that's why we have to study, so that we can start getting clear about things.
And there's one question that's quite interesting. Is there an easy way to remain soul conscious in our routine?
I think, you know, I'm remembering Daddy Janky, and she would say, "Are you lazy or what?" None of this is easy because it's subtle. And so if you're ready to make yourself subtle, everything is easy, but it's not easy to make yourself subtle when you're gross. So you have to practice. And the important thing is to give a lot of attention to the study and the yoga, because everything proceeds from there. And if it were easy, we'd all be angels in 3 minutes flat, but that hasn't happened, and it won't. And so the problem is everybody's using this word easy Raj Yoga and assuming that it's supposed to be something that you do without any effort. But that's why I point out to people that Sahaj means in the context of other people, which is difficult because they're there because of your karmic accounts with them. They're there to test you and provoke you and give you a hard time. It's supposed to be like that. It's not supposed to be easy in the way that you don't have to make effort. It's easy in the sense that if you understand it really clearly, and if you do what Baba tells you to do, then it happens naturally. But you cannot avoid the work to counteract the force of this gravitational force of karma and weakness and all of this.
Baba says we should experience cheerfulness in the confluence age. Can you explain in what ways you became more cheerful through the years, especially while facing drama's extremes? What helps you keep being cheerful?
Well, you cannot do this if you don't have a sense of humor. And I think that a very good expression that Baba sometimes uses is that when he's watching us, he's watching cartoons. This is Mickey Mouse, Tom and Jerry. And so it's a hoot. But when you're looking at cartoons, if you would be like, if it be real, they're knocking each other out, throwing each other out of the window and pouncing on each other in all sorts of ways, and everybody enjoys it because it's a cartoon. So you just really need to have a very good sense of humor, and then you can remain cheerful, because if you take it too seriously, then you will make yourself miserable unnecessarily. And so it's just very good. I think also use the power of transformation, and something may be intended to be unpleasant for you, but you take it, they say take it with a pinch of salt, or you take it, not at face value. You alter it, you take it the way you want it to be. Because anyway, all the things that you experience in this world are through sense perception, and the place where you experience it is in your mind, and it's entirely up to you whether you're going to take it as a good thing or a bad thing. So if you take it as humorous, that's keeps you light and easy. The problem is morality. Morality is this is bad and this is good and it has to be like this and it can't be like that. People are very, very limited by those things.
So another one is coming. If God would have given us a shortcut slogan, what would it be? So we can overcome all the layers of prejudice.
Yeah.
When I slogan like see but don't see, hear but don't hear, or be a point, or say check, change, etc.
I know that's too difficult. The easiest one of all is Om Shanti, because Om Shanti has an infinite number of meanings. Om Shanti, okay, doesn't matter. Om Shanti, thank you very much, goodbye. Om Shanti, have a nice day. Just Om Shanti. Daddy Janki did these 3 Om Shantis, and I thought it was brilliant. Om Shanti, who am I? Don't forget who you are. Om Shanti, who do you belong to? I belong to God, so everything else is secondary. And Om Shanti, third one is, what am I doing? Doesn't matter what the other people are doing, what am I doing? And then I think you'll be fine. That's a really good one.
Great, great. This is easy to remember. Now, the other one is there are qualities attributed to female gender. How do we have to understand really?
No, that's all lies. Um, this comes from the patriarchal culture, who says all females are nice and sweet and you can push them around as much as you want and they won't get back at you. That's not true. You have men who are very gentle, you have women who are very forceful. The way in which the society tries to get you to believe something that's not true is incredible. But there it is, and you just have to challenge it and say, what nonsense. Nonsense, nonsense.
Yeah, so true, so true. And Another one is Dönis Ben. I would like to know how to relate to the subtle region that we have to visualize to relate to Bapdada and the souls that are waiting there.
Ooh, I don't think I would do that. That's not Raj Yoga. No, what you do is you have to understand that there is such a thing as a subtle region, that you have the subtle body, and there are things going on there, and Brahma Baba, Bap Dada is in the subtle form, using the subtle body at this time. But, going there, Baba sometimes says, trying to go to the subtle region, that's another form of Maya. But you have to understand it. And there are some people who have the role of going in trance, offering bhog, and so on and so forth. But it was a lot at the beginning, and probably it will be toward the end. And when it comes, it comes. But what he wants us to do is to be soul conscious and understand the soul, understand soul consciousness, the contrast with body consciousness, and accumulate wisdom, accumulate experience, accumulate strength, because going through the destruction is not an easy matter, and it's coming along thick and fast nowadays, and so not so easy. Because when you're in the middle of destruction, you can't just sit down and meditate. You either have the spiritual power or you don't. And so while things are fine, you get the opportunity to accumulate.
There are three religions that he establishes. This he speaks in today's Murli. What are these three religions Baba is establishing?
He is establishing the deity, the Kshatriya, and the Brahmin. And they're not religions, they're dharmas. And normally you hear the word dharma is translated as religion, and then you think Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. But he doesn't create religions like that. The Brahman dharma it's like a way, like in China they have this expression, the Tao, which I think corresponds to dharma very well, actually, because it's a way of being, and it also includes understanding about the soul, God, cycle, karma, drama. And then all these people who are Brahmins, Brahma Kumars and Kumaris, they either pass or they fail. So those who pass become the deities, and those who fail become the Silver Age deities. So, and then you have to think, well, what is the difference between passing and failing? Because everybody passes and fails day to day. But I think it's really quite deep. And if you study the legends associated with the Golden Age and the legends associated with the Silver Age, there's one distinguishing characteristic, and that is that the people of the Golden Age are independent of public opinion, which is the same as independent of morality, which comes from the public, and conventions, which also come from the public. And then the people of the Silver Age are those who are limited by morality and social conventions, and they think that that is spiritual knowledge, but it isn't. So you can be a Brahmin of either category, and then you deal with all your different tests, and eventually at some point you will know whether you're in the Golden Age or the Silver Age or what. But these are the three religions that he establishes: Brahman, deity, Kshatriya, and they are kind of castes. And the castes are not according to the normal Indian caste system, but as a Brahman, you have to have all the practices of purity and be a spiritual warrior. as a deity, you are completely free from public opinion. And the Kshatriya is the one who is always having to deal with your issues with public opinion. I think that's one way to look at it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Please give some advice how to communicate gently and with patience with the worldly people after making the shift from the body consciousness to the soul consciousness.
Oh, well, you have to actually make that shift and then it'll be there. But it's in the process of making that shift that you feel frustrations and irritations. That means you still have a way to go to become soul conscious. And it takes a lifetime. So we have to be patient. And the people are giving us a hard time so that we develop our expertise. And that's their purpose, to help us become more expert at being gentle.
Another one, how can one tell the difference between wanting to do God do because of the reward of heaven, or because one truly believes or really wants to do good?
Yes.
Sorry, it's not good. It's good.
Well, a few people do something because they want to go to heaven, but mostly people do something because it's good or because it's right. And you know that if you're doing something in order to go to heaven, but that you don't really want to do it, then you're not really going to go to heaven anyway. So I think that you know if you know what motivates you. And this is a very important aspect of self-checking. Why do you do what you do? Because it's the right thing. That's the only reason that will really satisfy you. Otherwise, you're deceiving yourself.
How come most Brahmins are only from well-educated and socially somewhat from the same social background? She says not a question, but an observation.
Well, I don't know if you have seen the entirety of the Brahmin family. It's pretty large, and the majority of Brahmins are in India, and there are, most of the people are fairly simple devotional people, and there's quite a lot who are kind of upwardly mobile, business-minded, want to become good people, good and spiritual. But there's a very big spectrum. I think that there's not that many intellectuals, because intellectuals like everything to be quite complex and detailed, and they may give you a hard time with all their questions and so on.
That's very true. That's very true. I agree with that. And the one who says that give a yukti, please, how to have a constant pure feelings and good wishes for self and all.
Well, just keep on being genuine. I think that there's nothing like yuktis for this sort of thing, because it's all about being real. And so if you are really pure, then you will not have jealousy, resentment, etc., etc. And so the whole thing is about your own slow process of purification and becoming really genuine. And the sign of it is that you will have that. So focus on the purification and the signs will come.
Everyone is
Thank
so
you.
happy. So thank you so much for your time and your beautiful jewels. We are so happy to hear that. And I'm sure it clicks many things in our consciousness.
Well, thank you very much. It's been my great pleasure to be with all of you, and especially with you, Isigul, and
Thank
lovely
you.
to
Thank
connect
you.
in with Turkey. And I know there are people from other parts, and I can't see everybody, but I can see the tech support and some of the translators. So lots of love to everyone, and many, many thanks.